This will be our full review then of Renfield.
Yes.
Nicolas Cage, Nicholas Hoult, and now I've forgotten who else is in Renfield, and I literally saw it about
Awkwafina, Ben
12 hours ago.
Schwartz.
Awkwafina, yes. Who I always like Awkwafina. There was people complaining that Awkwafina always does the same thing. I do not care. So many actors throughout history have done the same thing
Yeah,
constantly
no, and I
throughout their
think
entire career, and
she
it's
just
always
kind of
been great.
she had this kind of issue in terms of like using black scent and kind of doing things like that and not really being too understanding or apologetic of how um
I must
that
have
might
missed this. When was this?
how that might be upset people. So I mean, in the early stages of her career, she was doing kind of this black scent thing, and she's continued to do it on other shows that she's been a part of, and so yeah, that was kind of the biggest controversy, kind of surrounding her in recent times, and so I don't know if that's still something that our people are frustrated about. And I want to say when like people were trying to bring that to her attention, she was very much like, I don't care kind of attitude. So I liked Aquafina in the earlier things I've seen her in. I think the first thing I even saw her in was Crazy Rich Asians, and I thought she was really great in that and really likable. Liked her in Shang-Chi. Um, so yeah, I mean, I like her as an actress, and I haven't really seen her do a lot of that. What people are describing, I know she's done in kind of maybe comedy stuff and shows that she's done. I think she did it a little bit when she was in that Ocean's 8 movie. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Honestly, I can't speak to that. I wasn't even aware of that. So
no,
I have liked her in everything I've seen her in, even though she does have the same kind of comedy beat. She's the same really kind of
kind of loud, fast talking, kind of yeah,
almost frustrated
yeah,
comedian when she's kind of just everything's got on it.
yes,
Everything's just comes with that. And it's always like, right, what was God, it's gotta be like this. It's very, very energetic
yeah.
and almost almost frustrated, like I said, but I do find her very likable.
Yes.
I
I
do.
mean, how did you feel that they, like, hinted at a romance but didn't, like, really fully go for it?
Oh, I don't mind that. I don't mind that. Ultimately, look, I think Renfield is a very bold kind of tone mash. And I mean that in because ultimately it's a Dracula movie, but it's
Yeah.
also a police crime thriller. But it's also a stupid, goofy movie. But it's also trying to say something about having self-love
Codependency and
and
and being
codependency.
independent. Yeah.
Trying to throw a full romance in there as well, I think would have been a little too much. And at
Fair.
times it feels like it's a little too, I don't want to say all over the place, but it's getting on that track sometimes. Now, don't get me wrong. I had a lot of fun with this movie. I really did enjoy this movie. I think it's got so much love
Yeah.
for Dracula lore, for vampire lore,
Oh,
for this
yeah,
kind of
that
thing.
opening was so fun.
The opening of the movie, I mean, the very ending of the movie, like usually when you get to the end of the movie, you'll have the title of the movie come up on screen,
Mhm.
say like the end, Renfield, like you get in this movie, and it had the yellow kind of
Yes.
Dracula font
Font,
where it
yeah. Has the
I don't even
teeth,
know
kinda
how to
fangs.
describe that
Yeah,
font.
it's, like,
How do
pointy.
you even describe that font? It kind of goes back in on itself,
Yeah,
You'll see the
mhm.
Dracula poster, the yellow text, and it had that
Yeah.
at the end. The opening of the movie, I think, is just wonderful. I mean, you get the whole fairly quickly told flashback story of how Renfield, Nicholas Hoult comes to uh,
Be
meet
the familiar,
Dracula,
yeah.
comes to be Dracula's familiar, and it is all played out in the scenes of Dracula 1931 of Bela Lugosi's
Yeah,
Dracula
it looks
that
so good.
appears to be literal just digital insertion of
Yes,
Nicholas
like
Hoult and
superimposed
Nicolas
in
Cage
those actual scenes, yeah.
into those scenes. Yes, because it's far too accurate to not be that. Like, they
Yeah.
haven't recreated things there. They haven't. That is, they are playing those scenes from that movie. I mean, there's shots without them or without those two in the opening that are direct shots from Dracula. Like,
Yeah.
that is just a shot from Dracula. You don't see Nick Cage, you don't see Nicholas Hoult. It's like, I think there's one on the boat, actually. We were talking about the Dracula boat movie before.
Mhm.
There is one on the boat that's just like, yes, that is a shot from Dracula.
Yeah.
That is very clearly, and I know full well that is a shot from Dracula. I loved this opening. Showing just so much love for a movie that, and I suppose an era of movies that Universal have tried so
To
hard and
revive
so
and bring
poorly
back. Yeah.
to bring back. So poorly. Like, they can't do it. They seem incapable of being able to do it properly.
Yeah.
But almost this is how you do it. Because this showed more love for those movies than
Than any of those
any
other
of the
ones.
stupid attempts, Dracula Untold and all this kind of. Is it
Yeah.
called Dracula Untold? What's it
Mhm.
called? The one with
Yeah.
Luke Evans.
Mhm.
Any of those stupid movies ever did. It shows way more love for that. To have
Yeah.
it directly involve the
Those
movie
scenes from
Dracula
that movie, yeah, it was a fun surprise to see that, for sure.
right at the beginning is wonderful. And Nick Cage is giving it absolutely everything that he
Oh
wanted
yeah,
to
he's
as
totally
well.
hamming up. You can tell this was, like, a role he's wanted to play, um,
But
for a
a
long
role he's
time.
wanted to play stupidly, because let's call it what it is. Nick Cage likes he likes being serious every now and again. I think I saw a recent
But I
interview with him where his favorite movie he's ever made was Pig, which is really quite a serious movie.
yeah.
It's personal, it's kind of quiet, it's not shouty Nick Cage. This is shouty Nick Cage. He
Like, very
clearly also
campy, over
loves
the
doing
top,
this.
having fun, yeah.
And why not do it? It's perfect. It doesn't demean the character of Dracula, this particular performance. It, I think, brings fun to the character of
Yeah.
Dracula.
Mhm.
And I think people watching this who haven't seen Dracula, or the older Dracula movies, whatever, however, there's obviously dozens, really,
Yes.
but who haven't seen older Dracula movies, obviously still aware of Dracula. But this movie, I think, will open will open those movies up to more people because of how fun this depiction of Dracula was, and how fun this depiction of the relationship, or the Dracula Renfield relationship, was, even though it's obviously very horrible, very manipulative, very domineering. To have it be, to have the whole movie be a story about learning to love yourself,
Yeah.
Renfield learning to love yourself, learning
Learning
to
to break
steer
free
away.
from, learning to put the energies that you put into somebody else into yourself.
Yeah, which is, I think, a really positive message, and a message that's dealt
Yeah.
with really quite well in the movie. Um,
And to use this relationship dynamic of a of a vampire and their familiar to,
yeah,
tackle this kind of, serious kind of issue, I think is a funny,
in a
fun thing to do.
in a strange way, it makes such an issue more accessible,
Mhm.
because it puts that fantasy element on it. It puts that it puts that fictional element on it that a lot of people need to, because they're not just going to go and watch a miserable movie about
Well,
somebody
yeah.
trying to break free of an abusive relationship, are they? Because
Yes,
who goes
and
and
we get
watches
those.
who goes and watches those movies just on a whim? Nobody really, do they? But people go
Yeah.
and watch these kind of movies on a whim because they see, oh, Nick Cage playing Dracula, how exciting. And then they can
Yes.
watch a movie that's actually about breaking free from an abusive relationship.
Yes, but then there's that balance of having this support group and actually seeing people who are dealing with the real world versions of those things.
Yeah.
And the fact that it so relates to what Renfield is going through is just this really funny juxtaposition of this issue. So we
Yeah.
do actually get to see the real world aspect of those people, and then the fact this added fantastical layer of then Renfield using that as okay, the people who have hurt or abused my friends in this group, these are the people I'm going to kill and take back to Dracula for food.
Yeah.
In a very much Dexter kind of aspect of, I have if I have to kill, I'm going to kill bad people or I'm going to attack.
Yes,
And
kind of. That's that
yeah.
is what Renfield's kind of mentality seems to be, but he doesn't even really want to do that, does he? He just kind of
Yeah.
wants to be a good person.
And be
I
free
think,
and do his own thing. Yeah.
yeah, I really do think the humor does work well in this movie, though, because it's completely goofy.
Yeah.
It's slapstick at times as well. I mean, Nick Cage himself is, like you said, so hammy, but like to the point where it's almost unbelievable how hammy he is because he will just shout random words like in the middle of sentences. Like one
Yeah.
word will be pronounced far differently than the rest of the sentence, and it's
Oh
things like
yeah.
that that just like, what? Have I just heard that right? Have I
Yes,
just heard?
he's
Haven't
totally
I?
going for it. He's going completely over the top, and like that's what we kind of know of him. So it works. I don't know that anyone else could have really pulled that off and really
Not to this extent.
gotten this perfect kind of mix of Bela Lugosi and the campiness of what this character is. So, in the context of this movie, so I think he's able to balance kind of what Bela Lugosi was doing as for his Dracula and the kind of silly campiness of what this movie is
Yeah.
giving.
Um. Yeah, because to be fair, it does obviously have a lot of love for particularly Lugosi's version because that is Universal's version. So
Yeah,
that is, they're gonna show a lot of love for that one as opposed to much else. Um, but no, I think Nick Cage really is great, but Nicholas Hoult is just perfect. I mean, I've always thought he's so great at playing kind of meek characters anyway.
yeah,
Because he's this gangly kind of individual, isn't he? Who's just kind of stick thin and kind of weedy and insecure, and he's just able. I don't know if Nicholas Hoult is like this at all. He probably isn't at all, is he really? But it he's always wonderful at playing those roles. It seems so perfect for him to play
yeah,
a character who is entirely at service of someone else and just wants to desperately get out of that,
yeah,
but he can't bring himself to, and he needs all this help. He's wonderful in this, and a lot of the humor that comes from him kind of being a little bit out of his own time because technically he's from like 100
yeah.
years ago.
Hmm.
There's a scene he's like, "Oh yeah, you must have," because he right. So Renfield gets powers from eating bugs, so he's able to like be
Yes, as
ridiculously
the
good at
familiar, he's
fighting.
given a portion of Dracula's powers
Yes,
as one of the perks of being a familiar.
but he has to eat bugs and in order to acquire this.
Yeah.
So because this movie is also a police thriller, which it
Yeah,
is,
this whole mob takedown movie.
Ben Schwartz, by the way, who knew he could play a convincing kind of ridiculously, again, hammy, but kind of mob character. I
Yeah, I
mean,
mean, he's pretty
yes,
douchey. I
okay,
mean, he usually plays, like, these douchey characters anyway, but
he does,
but just
there was a
turning the dial to villainous is like
and this
yeah.
was the thing. Yes, okay, of course. I mean, the first thing most people I think saw Ben Schwartz in was Parks and Rec's Jean Ralphio playing obviously
Yeah,
the ultimate douche.
yeah.
So of course he's able to do that, but there's genuine intimidation that you get sometimes from him in this movie, which is not something you associate with Ben Schwartz.
Mhm.
So I give a lot of credit to him for that, and his mother in this movie, who I always forget the name of the actress, but I love her voice so
Oh
much.
my
She was in
gosh.
The Exorcism of Emily Rose.
Yes.
She played one of the doctors in that. I always forget her name. Her voice I just love. Um, but I really like him in that. I really like him in this movie. Um, giving almost more credit to himself. You know, he's. I think it's now. You know, he would now be able to be cast in more serious roles almost.
Yes, I mean, even though this
Thanks to
was
this
kind of
movie.
silly, like, he really did hit the villainous aspect, so,
Yeah.
he could take that turn the dial the other way, and do the villainous serious, for sure, but yeah, I think he's the perfect person to play this, like, son of a mob leader, kind of lackey who thinks he's a big
Yeah.
shot type, he checks all those boxes. Her name is, Shohreh Aghdashloo.
Yes. There you go. Sure. And yeah, I do recognise that. I recognise her.
In
I think
anything, and
she's
that's just
great.
that
I love
voice in
her.
general, yeah, yeah,
Um, but the comedy that comes from him, from Ben Schwartz works as well. The
yeah,
comedy that comes from everybody really does work. I was saying there's a scene when, because Renfield wants to be, ultimately he wants to kind of save people. He wants to just be a normal human. He's getting tired of Dracula, really, isn't
yes.
he? He doesn't want to be dealing with Dracula anymore. Dracula at this point is also like kind of half returning to power,
Yeah,
at the
he's
beginning of the
regenerating
movie.
after he's been attacked, so then it's like they've been slowly trying to regenerate him back to his full strength. Um,
Which, by the way, the makeup again is
oh
just
my gosh.
stunning.
Yes, lots of practical makeup. So there was a lot of CGI blood and guts and things, but when
Oh,
they actually did
sure, of course
when
there
they
was,
did
but
the practical makeup,
Dracula
especially the stuff they
himself,
were doing to Dracula, looked so good, and like, his different stages of growing back,
yeah,
his strength. Yeah, it looked really good.
Dracula himself has great practical effects on him. But there is a scene in this kind of bar, restaurant, club location, because it's set in New Orleans as well, which is
Yeah,
what a perfect place to set a vampire movie of any kind anyway,
yeah,
because
yeah,
New Orleans is full of vampires, as we all know.
yes.
I think that's just perfect, and you don't get that many New Orleans movies, do you, Janine? No, you
No,
don't.
it's always New York or Los Angeles or
You
London.
do not get. You do not get that many New
Yeah,
Orleans movies, so I was quite
it's nice.
pleased about that. It reminds me that I want to go back to New Orleans.
I've never been. That's my, like, dream place to go visit.
Anyway, for God's sake, say what you were saying, please. Get it out of yourself, Morgan. Um, there is a scene when Renfield basically destroys an entire room of mobsters because they come in and they want to try and find him and Awkwafina in this bar,
Yeah.
in this restaurant. And he eats this bug and he just takes them all out with this ridiculous kind of action set piece, right?
Yeah.
And Aquafina says to me, "Oh, that was very impressive. Yes, you must be military." And he says, "Well, yes, I was once in the war, the Great War." It's just and there's a pause. Of just like the
Wait,
the
what?
Great
The Great
War.
War? Which
Yes,
Great War are we
Iraq.
talking about?
Iraq, it wasn't great, you know, 3 out of 5 stars, actually, really. I suppose I shouldn't be calling it great war.
Yeah.
Stupid humor
Yeah.
that works in this movie.
And even this whole kind of, I mean, obviously we're getting into spoilers with this. But even that whole sequence where he's at the group and they kind of do build him up and give him the confidence to move forward with his life and be independent and move out on his own and just stop serving Dracula. And so he does, and he gets himself an apartment. And so there's a whole little montage of him like
Oh
buying
god,
new
yeah.
clothes and brushing his hair, and the group like giving him an advice on how to live a life. And he paints his apartment all these bright colors and gets all these bright clothes, and he's just like living this cute little independent life, and it's just very sweet. And also
Very
like,
colourful as well, like, all the
yes.
colours just been brought
Mhm.
back to Renfield's life.
Yes, because he's just so dry and dull and pale and, after all these years of servitude. So it's nice to see that, like, the life he chooses, he wants it to be bright and happy. He has a whole wall of just like these cheesy inspirational posters.
He does, yes, he
Um,
does.
and, and then out of nowhere, like, uh, again, spoilers, when Dracula finally realizes, like, where have you been? Why aren't you serving me? How dare you? And Dracula ends up killing his whole support group. And I actually felt really emotional, like, I was really
Right.
sad, when like, because he's like, "These are my friends," and he felt, he was so sad and feels guilty that, it's his fault, and yes,
At
I
this
was
point, you'd
feeling
spent enough time with them
with these
to kind of
people,
get to
yeah.
know them,
Mhm.
and it
And the
does
fact
feel
that they
like a
were
very
all, like,
unceremonious
yeah.
killing scene.
Yes, and the fact that they were all, like, willing to, like, step up and give him a piece of advice when he was, going through his big transition and all of that. So, like, this silly movie has been so ridiculous up to this point, and then when his whole support group gets killed by Dracula, you actually feel something. You feel really sad and scared for
You
him,
do.
because then cops walk in and he's here with all these bodies, and yeah, you really get this emotional hit when you're not really expecting it.
You really do, and I think this movie is actually great at doing that. It's very close to being a tonal mess,
Yeah.
but thankfully never gets
They
to be a tonal
no,
mess.
they do keep it in a nice direct spot, as opposed to kind of veering one way or the other with how ridiculous it gets. So I really had a lot of fun with this movie. I enjoyed it. There were things that made me
I
laugh.
really did.
I liked the style of it. I mean, I liked the homages to the original Dracula film. I liked the characters. I liked using this dynamic to really speak to some real difficult dynamics in terms of abuse and codependency and things like that. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, just had a blast with this movie. I enjoyed it.
And look, I think we've now got ourselves a really great, completely fresh retelling of The Invisible Man a few years ago.
Hmm.
We've got ourselves, I think, in this movie, a really fresh, really good retelling of the Dracula story and the Dracula
Yeah.
dynamic. Um, we'll have to wait for Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein to
Yes,
see
to
what's
see,
going on there.
yeah, I think it's definitely, you don't need dark universe. Just do these really interesting, fun stories with these beloved characters, these known characters, and just create a story with maybe some basis in some real, um,
Yeah,
original character elements, but go wholly original with it, like this movie was able to do, like The Invisible Man was able to do.
yeah,
A
definitely.
and you'll be on the right track, Universal, because whatever you were trying to do was not gonna work. And,
No,
even though my
not
little dream
making
was
it,
was for all those movies to lead up to a Monster Squad remake, um, but
it just
ultimately,
it will never work.
disappointed. Yeah,
They need to be individual. You can still
yes,
make them, but they need to be individualized
you
because
need
they
to be
all
their own
have,
thing.
and they all should have these days, significantly different tones. Like, I think this is a perfectly reasonable way to do Dracula, because at this point, Dracula in particular, and in particular Bela Lugosi's Dracula, because really, what impression does everybody do when they do an impression of Dracula? They do Bela Lugosi's
Bela
voice, which is
Lugosi, yeah.
ultimately the Count from Sesame Street as well. Because
Yes.
where does he get his voice from? Bela
Bela
Lugosi.
Lugosi. Yeah.
So at this point, Dracula's voice, Dracula's attitude, Dracula, everything about Dracula is so caricatured that you have to make a caricature of a movie for it
Yeah.
to actually be a good movie.
Yeah. You
Like this
can't make
movie.
this serious character thing like they were doing with Dracula Untold.
Or you change up the tone completely, like the Last Voyage of Demeter looks like it's doing, and like I would hope this potential Chloe Zhao Pattinson potentially Dracula movie would do.
Yeah.
If you want to do it seriously. But to do it directly, you know, in the vein of the old Universal monster movies, Dracula, I think, had to be done like this.
Yeah.
The Invisible Man, I think, is a completely different beast. You can do it like that. I think if you were to do a Wolfman as well, you could make that a really serious movie.
Mhm.
You could make that such a. I think the Invisible Man, the Wolfman, should be. Almost take Remus Lupin from Harry Potter, and just have that level of misery and depression kind of put on
Yeah.
an entire movie, and have
Mhm.
them deal with that. Have it be very, very isolating. Have the Wolfman treated like a disease-ridden, who needs to be locked away.
Yeah, and have
Um,
this fear of getting close to people, this paranoia of, when is it going to happen? And
and have it
yeah.
mirror that in the real world, and have the Wolfman obviously eventually kind of come out of that and be able to
Yeah.
deal with themselves, almost in a strange way, what Ed Norton's Incredible Hulk did.
Mhm.
I think that is how you do the Wolfman, but I would like to see it done actually more seriously
Yeah.
and more darker than something like
Yeah,
that.
like Invisible Man, very much.
Frankenstein's fair game, I think, for anything.
Yeah.
You could make goofy Frankenstein. You could make really serious
Mhm.
Frankenstein. Guillermo del Toro, I have faith in
Have at
you.
it. Yeah.
So do whatever you want with that. But no, I really had a lot of fun with Renfield. I really did. Applause for Renfield. I
Yay.
think it has to be said.